This video is brought to you by CuriosityStream. You don't have to be stuck in a Nevada burn ward after touching a boiling hot doorknob to know that it's hotter than Satan's armpit. And I'm not talking like go kick it at the beach hot either, because Florida's ocean is basically a budget jacuzzi. Meanwhile, park rangers in Utah baked cookies in their car and overheated Texas chickens are fleeing their farms. Which, okay, so that's sad, but also, where do they think they're going? To be clear, the scientific community is case closed about what's happening here. A 2021 survey of over 88,000 peer-reviewed scientific papers found a 99.9% consensus that climate change is mainly caused by humans. And yet, plenty of powerful folks continue to paint anyone freaking out about the Earth's future as cranks, liars, or alarmists. Meanwhile, others argue that we have to choose between protecting our economy and protecting our planet. Which, I mean, look, you can have a planet without an economy, but where's your precious little economy gonna go when the planet dies, bro? At the same time, politicians who propose changes like the Green New Deal are dismissed as idealistic or even radical. So, in the face of unshakable scientific data, why does the debate over climate change rage on harder than a roided up El Nino? How has climate change denialism survived in the face of overwhelming evidence that first, the planet is getting warmer, and second, it's 1000% our fault? And why does it increasingly feel like we're being told,
"Don't look up! It's not above you of your freedom. Don't look up! Don't look up!"
I got a feeling we're gonna hate the answers, but let's find out anyway in this video how climate change denialism won. But before we get into it, I want to tell you guys about today's sponsor, CuriosityStream. CuriosityStream offers this incredible selection of award-winning and original documentary films, shows, and series that you actually can't find anywhere else. Regardless of what you're interested in learning about, there's probably something that you're gonna love. They've got everything from science and nature docs to stuff about history, technology, military history, music, food, and a lot more. What sets CuriosityStream apart is their commitment to providing brand new content every single week. That way, even if you somehow manage to watch your way through their entire library, which would be quite the undertaking, you're always gonna have something new to check out. The best part is, their plans start at under $5 a month, which if you're paying for like 5 different streaming services like I am, is kind of unheard of. You can choose to pay every month or you can get an annual plan, so you have a subscription that fits both your preferences and your budget. No matter where or how you like to watch, CuriosityStream has you covered. Their platform is available on your TV, computer, and your phone. Now you can enjoy your favorite documentaries and shows at your convenience, whether you're at home or, out doing all the things that you love. If you're someone who loves to learn, CuriosityStream is the perfect match for you. With a strong emphasis on science, history, and tech, their documentaries are not only informative, but also they're really cool and fun to watch. If you want to check out what I personally think is one of the best streaming services out there, go to curiositystream.com/wisecrack or scan the QR code for unlimited access to some seriously fascinating documentaries and nonfiction series. When you sign up, use promo code Wisecrack to get 25% off your subscription. Again, go to curiositystream.com/wisecrack and use the promo code Wisecrack to get 25% off your subscription. And now, back to the show. The year was 1959, and the American Petroleum Institute was celebrating its 100th birthday. But instead of cutting a cake, guest of honor physicist Edward Teller issued a dark warning. A 10% increase in carbon dioxide emissions would melt enough Arctic glacier to submerge New York City. Now, the oil industry listened carefully, and then they leapt into action. Just kidding, they totally ignored him. But ignoring concerns about global warming was actually old hat by then. Back in 1896, you heard that right, 1896, Swedish physical chemist Svante Arrhenius first modeled the greenhouse effect. He theorized that carbon dioxide would get trapped in the atmosphere and warm the planet. But according to physicist Spencer Weert, his ideas were dismissed. That's because scientists at the time wholeheartedly believed in the self-regulating power of planet Earth and its atmosphere, an enduring balance no mere man-made force could endanger, right? We hear similar arguments today about the Earth's natural warming cycle. Tell that to the egg frying outside in Turkey, my guy. Now, as author David Lipsky chronicles in his new book, The Parrot and the Igloo, news articles about unprecedented heat have been cropping up since the 1920s, and scientific groups in both the US and the Soviet Union were noticing weird things like melting glaciers as early as the 30s. But humans are adorably literal creatures, and it took horrible smog in early 1950s America, like 40% of Chicago's sunlight being hidden by smog, to get everyone to be like, maybe pollution isn't so cute? Yeah, that's right. We don't give a shit about killing the Earth until it starts choking us back. Cold War military investment in science led to all kinds of concerning discoveries, which overwhelmingly indicated that treating the Earth like an impromptu beach bonfire was probably not a great idea. Flash forward to 1965, when President Lyndon B. Johnson's Scientific Advisory Committee wrote that pollutants have altered on a global scale the carbon dioxide content of the air, and time is running out to fix it. If that sounds eerily familiar, well, it is. Climate change warnings have been alarmingly repetitive for over 50 years. Meanwhile, scientists' predictions about the planet warming keep coming true. The 1970s were filled with more of the same, but little to nothing was done to wean us off fossil fuels. To understand why, it helps to look at another panic that originated in the 50s. Yep, cigarettes.
Yeah, Barney Winston tastes good, like a cigarette should.
In 1953, the American public learned that cigarettes cause cancer, something big tobacco execs, according to Lipsky's book, had known since the 40s. Fully panicking, Big T came up with the Tobacco Industry Research Committee. This might seem counterintuitive. Why would they want more data about how their product was killing people? Well, as author and biologist Siddhartha Mukherjee writes, rather than discourage further research, tobacco companies proposed letting scientists have more of it. If more research was needed, the issue was still mired in doubt. Indeed, as a Brown and Williamson cigarette exec wrote, doubt is our product. Big Tobacco recruited dubious characters from the fringes of the science world to parrot their talking points. First up was outspoken eugenicist Clarence Cook Little. Later was Fred Singer, who was, among other things, a close bud and employee of the abusive and violent 70s Moonies cult leader Sun Myung Moon. It was an interesting cast, to say the least. So, facing public concern in the 70s, fossil fuel behemoths Shell and BP took a page out of Big Tobacco's playbook and had some scientists look into this whole greenhouse gas thing. The findings weren't pretty. In 1977, Exxon's own scientist warned executives of overwhelming consensus that fossil fuels were a big problem. Findings the execs hid. By 1982, scientists predicted catastrophe if the company followed its 50-year plan. Shell's own researchers discovered much of the same in 1988. The companies immediately pledged to change their ways and I'm repeating the same joke, aren't I? But fear not. Stressed out fossil fuel execs would get a nice vacation in the form of, say it with me, President Ronald Reagan. Unmoved by something as uncinematic as long-term climate change, Reagan fired top climate scientists and cut funding to carbon pollution studies. Meanwhile, his energy secretary openly fantasized about shutting down his own department. But the alarming reports just kept on coming. So, Reagan's science advisor went into spin mode. Like those cigarette execs of yore, he called for more research and effectively contorted the evidence to suggest that, 1, there was no way to stop global warming, and 2, we could totally cope with a steamy planet, summer all year round. YOLO! This effectively killed any mainstream sense of urgency about climate change for years, even though the 80s were the warmest decade on record. So far. That is, until Dr. James Hansen, the head of a NASA study group, told Congress in 1988 in no uncertain terms that warming had officially begun. That year, over half of Americans said they knew about the greenhouse effect, and most were very concerned. While stumping for president, self-avowed environmentalist Daddy Bush vowed to do something about it. But once elected, he almost never spoke about climate change. Instead, his administration did things like hand out talking points to political allies that cautioned against even discussing the existence of global warming. When they did, they should follow the fossil fuel industry's example and tell folks to focus on uncertainties that needed to be better understood. Meanwhile, Big Oil wasn't out there twiddling its thumbs. In 1989, Shell, BP, and friends formed the Global Climate Coalition, or GCC, to save the planet. Yeah, just kidding. The GCC was created to lobby against any action on carbon emissions, and lobby they did. In the first 10 years, the organization's members would donate $63 million to politicians, not counting money spent on the organization's own campaigns. As the 90s brought warmer weather, more dire warnings, and reinvigorated public concern about global warming, these corporations worked overtime to combat the alarm. As Weird puts it, it was not necessary to disprove the scientific consensus. It would suffice to raise enough questions to convince the public that there was no consensus. To that end, Exxon hired some of Big Tobacco's PR superstars, including cult guy Dr. Fred Singer, to push back against climate consensus. In '91, Shell put out an educational film warning about the dangers of climate change, mimicking Big Tobacco's anti-smoking ads. Meanwhile, places like the Cato Institute, Competitive Enterprise Institute, and Heritage Foundation sponsored all kinds of anti-environmentalist propaganda, including lectures, pamphlets, ads, and books with the same message. Global warming warming is a scare tactic worked up by power-hungry bureaucrats. Also, the EPA is the Gestapo.
I can only say that what this country does not need is another Gestapo bureaucracy like the EPA and OSHA.
So, these big oil-backed scientists were hard at work being bad at science. And forgive me, we're gonna get in the weeds here. In 1991, energy expert and fossil fuel darling Mark Mills formed the shadowy Center for Science, Technology, and Media, and sponsored a Gallup poll asking climate scientists if they believed in global warming. The media reported that Gallup had found only 17% of scientists said yes. This number was widely published and parroted all over the news, as recently as 2007 by Sean Hannity. People were stunned. Global warming was barely a thing. Heavyweight climate science groups fired back with their own contrasting surveys. Meanwhile, Gallup publicly refuted the study twice. And rightfully so. In actuality, the poll revealed that 66% of scientists believed that global warming was indeed a thing, but the 17% talking point had been unleashed. So where did it come from? Well, Gallup eventually told a journalist that Mark Mills had recalculated some responses and arrived at an erroneous conclusion, which sounds like polite words for "you lie!" Still, it was enough to dampen public concern. For his part, Dr. Singer was paid $95,000 by a fossil fuel company for compiling a list of 100 climate scientists who disavowed climate change. He would regularly claim to have never been paid for this work. Anyway, this list has been thoroughly debunked. Many claimed never to have signed it in the first place, and 25 of those who did were literally weathermen, some of whom even lacked a bachelor's degree. But Singer paraded the list all over the media. There are so many more examples of this blatant scientific deceit, so check out Lipsky's book if you're not fully convinced. But the point is, these scientists did successfully inject some doubt into the public debate, and the media, ever striving for some utopian ideal of objectivity, eagerly sought out their comments in order to show that they were presenting both sides of the issue. Presenting both sides invariably creates the perception that both sides are equally valid, or that the truth exists somewhere in the middle. So, it's no wonder that, over the course of the 90s, public concern would be soothed. A Pew Research study in 1997 found overall less alarm about a range of environmental issues compared to the early 1990s. That same year, the UN's Kyoto Protocol was looming. It would require industrialized nations to reduce carbon emissions. Finally, a chance to enact a worldwide plan to fight climate change. We'd be saved! Except the fossil fuel industry threw $13 million into an advertising campaign to kill the deal.
It's not global, and it won't work.
They argued now familiar talking points. Taking action on fossil fuels would hurt the economy. It's not fair for the US to make compromises unless every other country does, etc., etc.
We pay the price, and they're exempt.
In 1998, under pressure from oil companies and the convenient political fallout from an infamous blue dress,
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
You lie!
the US Senate passed a resolution effectively killing any chance of America joining the treaty. Under George II, global warming became increasingly politicized. In a 2002 strategy guide, influential Republican pollster Frank Luntz spelled out the rhetoric that would become Republican marching orders. Luntz wrote, "It's time for us to start talking about climate change instead of global warming. Climate change is less frightening. Climate change suggests a more controllable and less emotional challenge." Yeah, that's right. You probably thought the term global warming evolved into climate change to be more scientifically precise. In actuality, an overpaid Republican strategist decided it was less scary. In W's White House, Chief of Staff for the Council on Environmental Quality regularly changed the wording of government scientists' findings to emphasize doubt and uncertainty where there was none. The Department of Interior purged words like climate change, warming climate, and global warming out of press releases. So a NASA-penned headline like "Cool Antarctica may warm rapidly this century" would be massaged into something more nebulous and less alarming, like "Study shows potential for Antarctic climate change." So, who was this environmental quality guy who made the estimated 294 edits to climate change news under Bush's watch? One Phil Cooney. His previous employer, the American Petroleum Institute, where his job was specifically developing the lobby's campaign against the Kyoto Protocol. Anyway, between 2000 and 2016, the fossil fuel industry spent more than $2 billion on congressional lobbying. In 2017, Trump received at least $500,000 each from Exxon, Chevron, and BP for his inauguration. The hard truth is that we're stuck in a debate manufactured by the most powerful emitters of fossil fuels. Though there have been various bursts of collective concern and even political will to take action over the decades, it never lasts long enough to make real change. Meanwhile, those companies and the politicians they pay off are still shaping the conversation on climate change.
The climate change agenda is a hoax.
And they're making your uncle ask questions that have been irrelevant to anyone actually listening since, I don't know, the American Petroleum Institute's 100th birthday? But what does this all mean for those of us who have some understanding of what's happening on our increasingly hellish planet? Honestly, and I'm so sorry, the truth is, we've kind of fallen victim to big oil's propaganda tactics too. For example, ever worried about your carbon footprint? You can thank good old British Petroleum, or BP, for that. That's right, PR firm Ogilvy and Mather invented the carbon footprint on behalf of the oil giant. Debuting online in 2004, BP's carbon footprint calculator allowed you to input your day-to-day activities and find out just how much you personally were responsible for our impending doom. It was so wildly successful at convincing us that we're the problem that it won the prestigious Gold Effie Award for advertising, which literally makes me want to vomit. Even today, the Environmental Protection Agency's own website helps you make similar calculations. And this isn't the first time big business has reframed environmental issues around personal responsibility. The 1950s Keep America Beautiful anti-littering campaign was founded by beverage and packaging industries. It famously featured the so-called Crying Indian TV commercial. In it, Italian-American actor Iron Eyes Cody, nay Espera Oscar de Corti, played the titular sad Native American in an ad as fake as the solution it offered. Clean up your shit and planet Earth will be chill. Now, it's great for us to try to be good stewards of the planet. We're not arguing against that. However, the pandemic lockdowns, which drastically slashed air travel, commuting by car, and so on, showed us that reducing our day-to-day consumer carbon footprints was, as The Guardian puts it, not enough to reverse the impacts of climate change. And this makes sense. Our personal impact is just a drop in the bucket when just 20 fossil fuel companies account for 35% of all carbon emissions. But you wouldn't know it from the explosion of guides to greening everything from your wardrobe to your sex life. All the onus has effectively been put on individual consumers. We saw this happen on a countrywide level too. Around 2006, as Lipsky chronicles, there was a surge of interest in fighting climate change in both politics and in business. Even Fox News steward Rupert Murdoch admitted that climate change was a reality. Tell that to his current Fox News host. Major corporations like Walmart, General Electric, and even BP asked Congress to institute climate legislation immediately. So what did Congress do with all this political momentum? Did they regulate emissions, invest in alternative energy? No, they banned incandescent light bulbs. A ban that has taken until literally the time of this video to actually go into effect. In the vein of the carbon footprint, instead of focusing on the people producing the pollution, Congress tried to make us consume more responsibly. Fascinating side note, Lipsky documents how this initiative was apparently started by Philips Electrics because they had created a more expensive light bulb to replace incandescents. It seems that even when climate change initiatives do happen, they come laden with business interests. So what we've seen is the fossil fuel industry's multi-pronged attack. First, inject doubt about the reality of climate change into the debate to stamp out political will to take action. Second, convince those who do believe in climate change that personal responsibility and ethical consumption are key to stopping it, thus clouding any collective momentum to take meaningful action against the industry. Oh, and I guess 3, throw a ton of money at scientists and politicians to do your bidding. Money never hurts. But what does this all mean for the rest of us? The truth is bleak. Whether we're climate change deniers or desperately trying to consume our way to a smaller carbon footprint in hopes that it's gonna fix things. Either way, we're avoiding a certain amount of existential terror that should rightfully accompany the realities of the warming planet, whether by ignoring it or inadvertently minimizing it. This makes us think of the idea of the Kantian sublime. As scholar Maggie Kane-Alainen describes it, the sublime is marked by an event or encounter with something so vast that it escapes all attempts to apprehend it fully. Climate change, if we really sit with its implications, is as frightening to us today as traveling the ocean once was to a couple of 15th century dudes in a rickety wooden boat. It's easier to just not face it, or to compartmentalize it as something that can be fixed by bringing tote bags to the supermarket. But either way you slice it, we're being duped by an industry that's been winning this game for half a century. On a recent podcast, documentarian Adam Curtis argued, depressingly, that he doesn't believe revolution is really possible today, because people aren't willing to deal with the discomforts, inconveniences, and pain that radical change requires. The fact is that if we're going to address the looming crisis, our lives need to change beyond buying reusable bamboo straws. This probably means using less electricity, buying fewer fun gizmos, cutting back on traveling and driving, and so on. In short, making all sorts of compromises that kind of sound like a bummer. And at the same time, we also need to put the onus back onto the fossil fuel companies to stop killing the planet and take steps to reverse the damage they've already caused. And facing down a hugely powerful industry isn't exactly easy. In the face of this inconvenience, it's no wonder why the fossil fuel industry's two options, deny or minimize, become so attractive.
It'll start getting cooler. You just watch.
I wish science agreed with you.
Well, I don't think science knows, actually.
And that's kind of what it comes down to. How did climate change denialism win? Because the richest companies in the world funded it, and it's more convenient than recognizing the truth. And while most of us should definitely try harder to consume less, take more public transport, etc., our real front line is government regulation to stop the main companies who are destroying the planet. We may find throwing soup at the Mona Lisa or stopping traffic and protest distasteful, but f***ing shit up and making it clear to our governments that we won't stand for being baked and flooded to death for corporate profits may just be our best and only hope. But what do you guys think? Was climate change denialism's rhetorical success inevitable? Are we naturally primed to play down existential threats like that of the warming planet? And what will it take for us to see meaningful action beyond banning light bulbs? Let us know in the comments. Huge thanks to our patrons for supporting the channel. We appreciate you so much. If you're interested in watching our videos early, without ads, and getting access to our exclusive content in our Discord server, check out our Patreon. And thanks to all of you for watching, liking, subscribing, and hanging out with us. You're the best. Catch you later.